We are now moving into the last part of our presentation today, and this is with regard to the international aspects of the EU ETS Directive. As it has been said into the introduction, the European climate policy is very closely linked to the international evolution and negotiations on climate change. It has been inspired by this international evolution, and now the European Union is really positioning itself as a leader at international level, and it can do so since it has the largest and a well-functioning EU ETS at European level. So the corollary of this European climate change policy is to give impulse at global level. There is a huge interaction between the European institutions and international bodies, not only the UNFCCC and the International Energy Agency, but also the OECD, which is also looking into some sustainable development issues, and climate change there plays a big role, and the European Union is quite involved into this one. Also, as it has been said, the European Union is trying to lead the negotiations at international level, and actually the position is to say that not only can we not afford waiting at European level, and so we are moving forward with this very ambitious ETS directive, but also we can afford the fight, financially speaking. So we want to be a leader, but we also want to give an impulse, also financially speaking, for developing countries around the world. And actually, the European Union has managed speaking in one voice at the latest conferences at international level with regard to climate, although it has not been into the position to really give this strong impulse, but we are going to discuss this one again. So let's look now at what we have been able to do with this Kyoto Protocol. It has been approved in 2002 in the European Union. Then we were only 15 member states. Now we are 28, and the EU ETS is covering 3 more countries on top of the 28. But what is important here is that if we look at this first period of the Kyoto Protocol, meaning 2008 to 2012, the EU has not only achieved its targets, it has overachieved. It has gone also in the ETS directive beyond its commitments under the Kyoto Protocol. And you can see that it is also quite important to be able to show such a track record if we want to become a leader at global level. And we want to become a leader, especially this year, because, as you know, in December 2015, there is going to be the Paris conference, the COP21, so-called Conference of Parties 21, which is going to try to have the signature of the successor to the Kyoto Protocol at global level. And at the beginning of this year, in February, the European Union has put forward its vision of the 2015 agreement. And it is quite interesting to note that we want to put the world actually on the track of at least 60% reduction of greenhouse gas emissions below 2010 levels by 2050. So we have taken this 2050 decarbonization target and try to now translate it at global level. We want to do this through a global carbon market. So this is why the European Union sees this next agreement to be signed in Paris, hopefully, as a legally binding agreement for all the parties, and they have to be as many as possible if we want to reach a global market in the coming issues. There are some important issues that we have to tackle. One of them is taking on board the developing countries, and they are very much looking into the help, financial help that the developed countries can provide. And they are also very much interested in the technology transfer to improve their decarbonization at national level. What can we expect from this Paris conference? Well, quite personally, I'm let's say, a little bit pessimistic with regard to this one, because I don't see for now, and it has been also recognized very recently by major players at European level in the European Commission. I don't see a very quick evolution in the international negotiations. But there is a kind of magic also in this kind of international agreements. So let's see what can come out from this one. In any case, we are probably quite far from a global market, but we can take major steps towards this one. And actually, the European Union is trying to move towards a global market through the so-called linkages between the European emissions trading scheme and some other trading schemes that have emerged around the world or that have been put into place right now. The first attempt to do so was with the Australian ETS. The preparation there started in 2013, but the same year there were quite important elections in the country, in Australia, which actually made climate change not such a big priority anymore for Australia. So this first linkage failed. But at the end of June this year, the European Union and China have had a summit in Brussels and have signed a joint declaration on climate change. And this has shown that the European Union is quite hopeful, let's say, into when looking into a linkage with the future ETS in the coming years. If we look at the global map prepared by the World Bank of the ETS like or carbon taxes systems put in place around the world, we can see that we are not there yet. First of all, there are not so many countries or regions covered by emissions trading schemes. And second point is that there is no homogeneity around the world. First of all, there are some carbon trading schemes, so something like a cap and trade scheme as in the European Union, and there are also some carbon taxes. So how can we harmonize that? Nevertheless, we are looking into this, but it has to be seen that with regard to this global dimension of the European policy, in 2012, the European Union has been responsible of around 10% of the global greenhouse gas emissions, and we are on track to meeting our commitments for 2020, meaning a 20% emissions reduction. And we would then be responsible of around 6% only of the global emissions. We have seen also that there are many countries where there is a rising trend in CO2 emissions, namely China, but also India and others. So in the long term, what could the European Union alone achieve at global level? This is quite an important issue to be tackled, and we are going to look very closely also at what happens in Paris at the end of this year, and maybe we are going to have some answers with regard to this question. If we look now also at the relations between the EU ETS Directive and the other pieces of legislation, when we looked at this 2050 low carbon economy roadmap, we have seen that it has been translated for the period until 2020 into three pieces of legislation. The first one being the ETS with this 20% reduction in emissions by 2020. But there is also the Energy Efficiency Directive, which is looking at a 20% improvement in emissions consumption by 2020, and also the Renewable Energies Directive with also another third 20% target by 2020. Now, if we translate that through the perspective of the so-called Energy Union communication that was published in February this year by the European Commission, we are envisaging a new target by 2030 for energy efficiency, which would be 27%, and also for renewable energies, again 27% by 2030. This has to be really fine-tuned in the coming months and years to see how we are going to really look into that. And it is also very important to take into account the so-called overlapping of policies, because, for instance, if you improve the share of renewable energies, if you improve energy efficiency, this means a reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. But these reductions are not truly taken into account into the EU ETS directive. So this is also an area of improvement in the coming months and years. Also, on the 15th of July 2015, we are expecting from the European Commission a so-called new internal energy market design, a new communication explaining how we are viewing into the future, and this is to start a discussion really with the stakeholders to understand what would be the future of the European internal energy market. And this has also important consequences because, for instance, if you want to have more energy efficiency, or if you want to have more renewable energies on the market, you have to adapt this market design to be able to actually welcome these energies on the grid, and so on and so forth. So this is one very important area where maybe there is also some kind of room of improvement for the EU ETS directive in the coming years. I hope this lecture has been interesting, has managed answering most of your questions, and I thank you for your attention.